Okay, and we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another amazing episode of Keeping It Rio. This is if my math is right, I think it's episode 111 by the time this comes out in a couple weeks. 111.
Nice.
And today is a very interesting podcast because I literally am just now meeting our guest for the very first time, which if you've watched Keeping It Rio, you know that's kind of my thing. I like to just introduce myself to strangers and see what we have in common. And I like to do it while recording it and showing it to the world. So without any further hesitation, let me welcome our guest, Mr. Brian Milligan. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How you doing, Chuck?
I'm doing awesome. This is a cool deal. Like I said, I always just kind of reach out and there's a Facebook group and I just put a post out like, I want to talk to funny and entertaining people that have energy. And I get people like yourself that respond to it. And then we just have these energetic, funny conversations. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I know I read a very little bit, but like I said, we just met 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and let's find something funny to talk about that we can make everybody crack up for the next 45 minutes with.
All right. I'm a regular guy from Florida, really, but I do stand up comedy. I've been doing it for 6 months now. I'm in Central Florida, like on the East Coast, so it's called Brevard County. Cocoa Beach is in our county, if you've ever heard of that. Like we're right on the ocean. It's a nice little community, and when I started doing stand up just a few, like I said, like 6 months ago, there was a very small scene here. Everybody was going to Orlando, and in the last like 6 months, we've just built this like big comedy scene here now. And so now we have, when I first started, there was like 3 or 4 comics in the area. And now we have like upwards of 20. And, we're just like building a nice scene here. and I mean, we still go out to Orlando and travel and do all that kind of stuff. But it's just, I don't know. It's exciting for me, man. You're like the first person.
Yeah, no doubt. So what gave you the...
Go ahead.
I love it. Yeah, this is cool. We're always breaking new ground here and keeping it Rio. So going out and jumping on stage and being a stand-up comedian, it's something that I thought about doing before, but I don't know. I couldn't get myself to do it. I think maybe nowadays I've got a little bit more confidence as far as being on stage and whatnot, but what motivates you to do that outside of being a little bit crazy? Because I mean, not everybody's willing to just throw themselves out there and start telling jokes and hoping that people laugh, because there's not even a guarantee of any of that stuff. So
That's
super
true.
brave. Tell me about the thought process that goes behind that. If there even is a thought process, maybe it's just one of those, screw it, man. I'm about to jump and hope to God that when I land, there's something soft.
Yeah.
So what's it like? How do you decide to become a stand-up comedian?
Well, I talked to my wife about it when we were kids. I've been married like next month will be 16 years. And so I met my wife when I was like 18, and I told her then, I was like, I want to do stand up, and kind of life got in the way. We had kids really quick. And, now I have like 2 older daughters, like 16 and 12. And which, what's funny is you said this is episode 111. That's my youngest daughter's birthday, 111. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. But yeah, so both my kids are kind of in entertainment as well. My youngest daughter is an actor. My older daughter is she's working on becoming a director. And my younger one does singing and stuff like that too. And we were at a singing competition, 7 months ago. In Orlando, and a bunch of kids tried out, and she kept getting through rounds, and I was seeing her backstage, and she was nervous as hell, and she would go up and through all the nerves, she would just kill it. You know what I mean? She would just go out and crush it. She didn't end up getting like on the singing tour, but she was at the top. Like she was one of the last people deleted, or whatever you call it, kicked off the show or whatever. But she, it kind of inspired me. It gave me confidence. Like, man, if I can see this 12-year-old girl get up with all this nerves and her shaking and stuff like that, and just go out and still kill it. And, I've been talking about doing this for 20 years. I kind of all gave me the confidence. I the fuel fire, I got fired up from my kid, so, and we started going to local comedy shows. There wasn't a lot at the time, like I said earlier. they had these like Friday night shows occasionally in a record shop and like a vintage record shop and clothing store. And they just had a stage in the corner. And so we would start going to these Friday night shows with just guys from Orlando and Jacksonville and, you know, all over Florida, really. And I just kind of was like, these are just regular dudes that are just coming out on a Friday night and making, you know, $60 to be in a record store in Melbourne. I was like, that seems less scary than when you watch like huge comics that are in a huge theater with 3 or 4 thousand people, and like that's terrifying, you know. So luckily we started going to those, and right after that they said, hey, we're gonna do an open mic on Sunday nights here, and if anybody's interested in doing it, come on and try out. And I decided to try out. Like I went to the very first one. It happened to be on 9/11. Like that was the first day I started comedy, you know. And and so since then, it's just like I said, it's grown into something that's just spectacular, man. Like we went from having one show every 2 weeks, or two, you know, we have another show in town that's like once a week. So I guess we had two shows before I started, and now we have sometimes upwards of 8, 9 shows a week. Like I mean, last night we did two shows in two different areas. The first show was packed, like I mean, it was standing room. The second show we did was it was more of like a crappy bar show. You know, there was just kind of older bar flies hanging out, but they had a good time too. So I don't know, man, it's exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. I love the fact that you're inspired by your children. That to me is the most awesome reason to go do something, especially living your dream like that.
Yeah.
Um, what type of crowds are you guys playing to? Are you playing more, you know, adult oriented type comedy? Is it something that the entire family can be a part of? What you know, what ultimately are you looking for there, and what's your ultimate goal? Who do you ultimately want to reach and entertain the most as far as that goes?
That's a good question, man. Most of our shows are definitely 21 and up, because comics are wild, man.
Yeah.
They say crazy stuff. They, you know, especially a like open mic comedy. If you're like ever somebody who's like, oh, I want to go to an open mic comedy, you know, just know that if you're a person who's easily offended, like it's people that are just trying stuff. Comedy is like, it's weird because the best comics go up and they do a set for an hour and they make everything seem so authentic. It seems like they're just saying it for the first time and it's making everybody laugh. You know what I mean? But really, it's throwing shit at the wall and sees what, you know, till you see what sticks. That's what comedy is. You just go out and try new stuff over and over and over again until something pops, and then you start writing a lot about that topic, whatever it was that made them laugh. You go, okay, where can I expand upon that? And so, but the good guys make it seem really authentic, you know? And so, but with repetition and stuff, anyway, back to your question. I dive off, you know, I'm going off topic. Really, like most of our audiences depend on the show. Like if we're up in Cocoa Beach, it's a predominantly older crowd, except for like spring break time, you know. There's a lot of condos up there, so you're gonna have shows that are like 65 and up. You know, I went up there when I first started, like within the first month, and it was my first time in a comedy club. And somebody had invited me, but I didn't know I was going to be doing stand up, so I wasn't prepared. And it was a crowd of nothing but like 65-year-old people, and it was the only time I've ever done comedy to nothing but silence. Like they didn't get me. There was zero connection there. But it was the only time that's happened. So I feel like I've done nothing but improve since then, you know?
And
But
it's a valuable thing to have. I'm sure everybody's got to have that humbling experience. If you go
yeah,
out and you just instantly start killing it every time, then, you know, you get a false sense of confidence.
yeah,
I guess having a bunch of elderly folks just staring at you blankly is a good way to say, all right, maybe
back
this
to,
isn't my target demo, or maybe I just need to work on my elderly jokes a little
yeah,
bit. But
yeah.
it's always cool to have that.
I got to work some Ben Gay
Let me
bits.
ask you this, okay? Something else with comedy that I see a lot, and I love watching outtakes of this stuff because it's just funny,
Uh-huh.
is there's hecklers in the audience. There's always going to be that person in the crowd that thinks they're funnier than you,
Oh
or wants to get some, you know, some attention or notoriety at your expense. Have you had to deal with anything like that in your brief career yet? Or Have you seen anybody do it? And if so, what's the most badass way that you've seen a comedian just absolutely slap down a heckler in front of a nice crowd of people? That's
Okay.
always fun to watch. I like when people try to make you look bad and they end up looking stupid. That's really,
Yes.
it's fun.
Well, so most of the time at comedy shows, people are drinking. So like
Hmm.
most hecklers are just like drunk people that are just babbling. I had a lady last night during my set that was just drunk babbling, and I kind of was just like, can you give me subtitles to what you're saying? Like, I don't understand. I was like, is your husband a construction worker? Because you're definitely hammered, like stuff like that. Just messing with her. Not going too hard on her because she is like she was very drunk. So but normally, like they kind of like if you just let them talk, they kind of make themselves look bad. You don't really have to do too much, because everybody's already like, get this, this person needs to be quiet. So they're the one in the room being disruptive. So a lot of times the audience just hates them immediately. So if you let them talk for just a few minutes, everybody starts, shut up, or that kind of thing. Uh, but I saw a lady. So we had this girl who was hosting a show. It was probably like 2 months ago, and she's a really funny comic. And there was a bunch of people talking in this show during a comic set, and she comes up after the comic to introduce the next person. And she goes, I want to remember exactly. She said, uh, treat this show like you're a 1950s housewife and only speak when you're spoken to. And it made everybody shut up. You know what I mean? It's kind of a crazy thing to say, but everybody went, "Oh my gosh," and they laughed for a second, and then we moved on, and it got everybody to be quiet. You know what I mean? There's no right way to deal with it. It's just, I've seen guys fly off the handle and just start cussing out the audience and stuff like that. I mean, it's, like I said, comedians are crazy. They're wild people. So, uh, I there's a reason why you never see green room videos of comics. They're all back there talking the craziest stuff ever, and and then they go out and try to keep it PC.
I love that too. Yeah, because it's so true. There's like once you get past that certain point, you've got to kind of tone it down a little bit. But when you're getting ready and you're
Yeah,
getting in your comedic zone, I know this because my comedic zone is super offensive.
yeah,
And it's usually when I've got someone in the truck with me and we're riding over to a job site or something and I'm getting my mind. And you come up with some unique thoughts and some
yeah.
unique insults and so on, and then you
Well,
jump out and say, "Hey, good morning. How you doing today, Mrs. Jones? It's great
exactly.
to see."
Exactly. You got your game face on. You were construction, man. I used to be a plumber years ago, and so I've been in the construction business as well. I mean, those guys are just as bad as comics. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
they're
dude, even probably worse, and it's so funny because everything that we talk about is real life. It's happening,
yep,
right before us. I have stories that people would never believe, but it's like, no, dude, I was there and it really did happen like that. And
yeah,
I think if I was, if at some point I want to do that same thing, I want to put together a stand-up routine and I want to do it at least once in my
you should.
life
Yeah,
just because I think it would be cool. I get to do convention speaking and things like that. So being in front of a crowd doesn't bother me, but
yeah.
I think putting yourself out there and seeing if you're really as funny as you think you are is something that it takes a lot of guts for sure.
It can
Um,
be humbling for sure.
I guarantee, I've been the guy who's told the joke that one or two people didn't laugh at, and I thought, damn, dude, that's horrible, but I can certainly appreciate it. As far as your stand-up comedy goes, obviously you started not that long ago, kind of
Yeah.
getting into it.
Hmm.
There's got to be something that you're doing as well throughout the course of the day to pay the bills while you're getting this career built up. What do you
Yes.
do as a day job? What's Brian's normal day look like? And is there such thing as a normal day for a aspiring stand-up comedian?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because you stay out late for stand up, but I'm actually a mailman. That's what I do for a living. I work for the United States Postal Service, so I deliver all the packages.
Nice. I like that. Without you, we wouldn't be getting all of our stuff,
Yeah,
delivered to our doors. So I appreciate your service there. I
thanks.
can imagine that throughout the course of your day, you probably have a little notepad and you could probably get an entire hour worth of stand up material just from your day job and some of the people that you run into.
Yeah,
Have you ever really started thinking about how to apply that into your routine? Is that something that you already kind of work into it as well, or do you try to keep your personal life and that stuff separate from what you're aspiring to do right now?
It,
How does that look?
it's kind of a fine line, man, because the Postal Service is a government organization. You know what I
Right?
mean? So they're not going to take too kindly to like people talking bad about them or things like that. So I try to keep my stand up away from the specifics of the Postal Service. If I talk about something that's going to be an experience I have with a customer or something like that, telling a story. I mean, we deliver sex toys and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes it gets a little, you hand somebody a vibrating box, you know what I mean? Like you kind of know what you're doing. So, it's stories like that. But I try to. I don't normally on stage say I work, for the Postal Service, or I try not to. I say I work for a courier service, or I deliver packages or something like that. I let them think, because it could be Amazon, could be FedEx or UPS. So, but yeah, I don't want Uncle Sam knocking on my door telling me I can't work at the post office for something I said on a stand-up comedy stage. So. But I do get a lot of material from it, and it gives me a lot of time to think. That's what it really is. I don't have a bunch of coworkers in my truck with me, so it's just me and mail. So you're right. I use my phone now instead of a notepad, but that's my digital notepad. If I have inspiration hit me for something, I always write it down. And luckily we have a bunch of shows here each week, so I can go try new material constantly. And like I said, you just got to find what works. That's all it is. It's trial and error, 100%. I think you should definitely go do 5 minutes, man. That's what most shows, you go to an open mic, it's always like 4 or 5 minutes. And I think everybody should try it. It's fun. And you might luck into new friendship, man. That's what happened to me. I mean, I kind of got brought into this whole community of guys and girls, but we kind of all have these bonds, because you go through these shows and some of them are just horrible shows. And like somebody's paying you $10 to be in a bar with 50 people that don't care that you're doing comedy at all. So it's a battle for attention at that point. And so at the end of it, it feels like we all just went through a very non-literal war, like a low stakes war. But yeah, I mean, at the end of it, we're like, yeah, and then when somebody has a really good set, and it's like afterwards, everybody's like, you killed it. It's very uplifting. So we're also in a weird area too, where like we have Cape Canaveral here, where all the cruise ships go out of. So we have a bunch of guys that live here that are like national headlining comics that we just never see, because they're out all over the place. They're doing cruise ships. They have a residency down at the Atlantis Motel. So we have like all these like guys I never met doing stand up. Like I have a friend of mine who started a podcast here locally, and he's sort of a headliner comic for Florida, and he's not like moved on to the national scale yet. But he in his podcast, he brings in all these headliners that he meets, and guys from all over the country. And I've been lucky enough to be part of his podcast as well. So I've met a bunch of these really, not like Dave Chappelle level comics, but definitely guys that are making their sole living, making hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars a year doing stand-up comedy. And they live right here in the same county as me, same town. Like I've never even heard of them, never met them, but they kind of, having conversations with them in this podcast has kind of shown me that there is a path to stand-up comedy as a career, even if you don't make it as a national super famous person. I mean, I met a guy the other day I've never heard of. He's been on TV a bunch of times. He's been living off comedy alone since 1992. You know what I mean? So he's like 30 years in as a comic with not having any regular day job. And I guarantee you've never heard of him. You know what I mean? So
And that's the cool thing about it is a lot of that stuff, you can do a lot of work and never even really be in front of a camera and like you said, make a damn good living out of it. Is that what you're ultimately looking for? I mean, you just said that you've got some, kids that are now teenage
Yeah.
years. Obviously, having a stable job when you've got children growing up is very important. Being able to
Yes.
have benefits and things like that so that your kids can be taken care of. But once they get a little bit older and aren't as dependent upon you, you can kind of go back and look at what you want to do. Are you thinking about making this stand-up comedy into a full-time gig that you do and, going out maybe, like you said, not even becoming national, but just traveling around Florida? Is that something that appeals to you, or is it something that you just think, you know what, I'll do this as long as it's fun. And if I make a couple bucks here or there, it's cool, but I just want to do it for the experience.
Yeah. When I first started, I just went out on a Sunday and I thought, oh, this will be something fun to try. Maybe I'll do it a few times, see what happens. And my third show I ever, so I did that Sunday and then the next Sunday. And when I was on that show, I did well enough to where a guy asked me, hey, do you want to do this other bigger show on Tuesday? So it was my third time going out and I show up in this room and it's packed. There's like 80 people there. And the open mics, there's nobody there. It's just comics. So I go up my third set in a room full of about 80 people and I kill it. Like, I mean, 5 minutes of just, almost nonstop laughter. And it was my first time in front of an audience doing comedy. And I got off the stage and I was walking past the bar and I was getting high fives and I got into the back area and the comics were just bear hugging me like, you killed it, and like, it was like this whole thing. And I knew right then that I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Like there's no stopping it. I'm definitely going to do this. And so to answer your question, yeah, I hope that this becomes something that I can eventually leave the post office and make enough money to supplement my family and put my kids through college and all that stuff. But I'm also like realistic in that, like, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success in comedy. You got to put a lot of time in because comedy is like 60% just making connections with other comics and you creating like a network that branches out across the country. Because like a recommendation from a comic goes further than you just being funny. Like, so if you're trying to get in a club in Milwaukee, or something like that, you've never been there, you could send 1,000 clips to the person who books that room, and never get in there. But a friend of yours that's there that goes, hey, this guy's really funny, you should book him. That's all you need, So really, you just build a network of people that, excuse me, network of people that have seen you, that know you're funny, that are friendly, and that's kind of how you become bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, you're touring nationally because you've went to all these places based on other people's recommendations.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I never really thought of it like that. I always just assumed you'd have to go out and just be funny and you could get stuff like that on merit alone, but
No,
you're
man,
right.
there's
I mean, the people that judge you the best are the people that are in your field, your peers, and they say, "You know what? If these funny people think this dude's funny, then we probably should try to hire him and probably bring him in."
yeah.
That's something I never thought of. So, that's awesome, really.
You only need two things. You either need a recommendation from a comic or you need to have like 1 million subscribers on a platform. Because like there's plenty of TikTokers that go sell out the Orlando Improv for a weekend and they're not funny at all. It's not, they're not even really comedians. They're just people who make viral videos and put on some kind of show. So it's kind of crazy. Like the funny people get it through recommendations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I love that. So let me ask you this, okay? I always love to kind of blend the careers together here. Like we said,
mhm,
there's always some funny stuff you're going to be dealing with when you're dealing with human beings.
mhm.
You get to go to people's door every day and deliver their mail.
Yeah.
I do this a lot with people in construction. I've done it with police officers, magicians. I
Mhm.
had an Elvis impersonator ask this question too one time. What is the absolute now, as a stand-up comedian, you see things a little bit differently than most people.
Mhm.
probably see the humor in just about everything. I'm that guy that's always laughing at stuff that's probably not appropriate to be laughing at,
Yeah.
but sometimes, that we're just wired that way. What is the most, now this is crazy because everybody is always like, oh yeah, I know exactly, the
Yeah.
most messed up thing you have seen as a postal carrier with another human being, a homeowner, someone coming to the door without any clothing on,
Yeah.
someone that's just got some crazy stuff coming out of their mouth when they open the door, or just weird living conditions. What's the craziest thing you've seen as a postal carrier in the United States of America?
Okay. I do have a good story. I will tell you, this is a little not safe for work. Yeah, just a little bit, not too bad, you know.
This is not with the postal service. This is just with a random
Yeah, random postal. Yeah,
package
random
delivery
non postal
service.
service. Yeah, no, it's not that bad. It's okay. So I used to work in a different state, and where I lived there, it was all like you had to walk up to each individual house to deliver mail. Like they didn't have mounted delivery mailboxes. It varies, by where you live, but that area, so it was all walking. I would walk, like my mail route was 13 and a half miles every day, so it was it was kind of hefty, but so I had to walk up a lot of porch steps and all that kind of stuff. And I walked up on a lady's porch and I put her mail in her mailbox, and I walked back down the porch and I looked into my satchel and I realized I had a small package for her, And so I go to turn around and she's already out at her mailbox getting her mail. And I go, hey, I had a package for you, like a small, it was about this big, you know what I mean? And she goes, you know what, just toss it to me, and does this right here, and I throw it to her, and I don't know what happened, but when she caught it, the bottom of it fell out, and a butt plug fell out on the ground at her feet, and it had a large raccoon tail attached to it. And she was the most red I've ever seen a person. And I was her mailman for another 2 years, and she would never make eye contact with me. You know what I mean? It was pretty it was pretty bad. I felt bad for the lady.
There you go. I mean, hey, there's always the implied risk. I mean, if you're going to purchase these types of items,
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen where, things get scratched and opened up and whatnot. You're taking a risk. But damn, that's got to be the worst possible scenario for her.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for it. I never met the lady, but
Me
hey, there
too.
you go. For the next 2 years, you walked up on that door and you just always kind of wondered what's going on behind these doors. And
Yeah.
that's
Well,
pretty good. Okay. That's definitely not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting, I
yeah.
got bit by a little dog or something, and
Oh, I've been.
a butt plug falling out of a tossed package doesn't get any better than that, ladies
That's
and
true.
gentlemen. That
That's
is
true.
the real world as far as some of the things that we see throughout the course of the day. And that did come up pretty quick. So I appreciate you sharing that one.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's start winding down just a little bit here. I always like to kind of veer off course and ask questions like I just did there. Um, what is your goal for stand-up comedy as far as the biggest room, the most prestigious that you'd like to do at some point in your career? Obviously, you start off small, playing clubs and little things. You ever see yourself, headlining Madison Square Garden or something crazy like that?
Yeah, that's the pinnacle, right? Madison Square Garden for sure. That would be the highlight. Once I got there, I knew I'm not going any bigger than this. Other than that, maybe like Red Rocks in Colorado. Like I don't know if you know it, it's a huge outdoor venue in the rocks, they carved it out of the mountains in Colorado. The Red Rock Mountains is beautiful. Something like that, man. Like, a couple thousand people watching you would be amazing. On a more local level, the Orlando Improv eventually. I'm fairly new at it, but I'm hoping I get booked constantly, so I know I'm heading in the right direction. So eventually, that's where I'd like to be. Just in the short term goal, and then long term, yeah, Madison Square Garden sold out show.
All right. Well, hey, it's been mentioned here on Keeping It Rio, episode 111, that you're going to play Madison Square Garden. And one day I'm going to come back and I'm going to clip this up and say, hey, you guys remember when this dude said he was going to play Madison Square Garden?
That's right.
And everybody's going to be excited because they've got their tickets to see you play.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome, pretty lofty goal. And I appreciate people that set those kind of goals, because really, you know, if you just said, yeah, I just want to get better at it, I just want to go do, you know, have fun with it, you're not really putting anything to work towards. And I mean, you literally just told, you know, between us, a couple hundred people, I don't know how many people watch my podcast, a couple
Yeah.
hundred, a couple thousand, millions at some point, I'm hoping, but
I'll cross my fingers for you.
we put it out to the world. Okay. You're going to headline Madison Square Garden. I'm going to have millions of viewers. So it's
That's
going to
right.
work, Brian. I appreciate that.
I'll
I
send you
will
a
be
ticket
honest with
too.
you. This has been kind of a difficult one on my end because your internet, for some reason, it's real choppy.
Oh,
So I've been trying to follow. If I've sounded like an idiot asking any of the questions, it's because I'm getting like little bits and pieces. But the cool thing is everything is being recorded locally as well. So it's going to be perfect as soon as I hit the button on it and it uploads everything. So
okay.
I do apologize to you if I'm a little bit off, but it has been a little sketchy. I don't want it to seem like I'm asking stupid questions or you're answering something and then I'm asking the same thing, but that's kind of what's been going on this side.
Okay. Sorry
Um,
about that.
no, dude, no worries, man. The internet, it is what it is. Trust me.
Yeah.
I've been cursing it a lot lately myself. Um, as we start to wind down, I definitely want to do my part to help you expand your career and your fan base. If
Okay.
anybody watching Keeping It Rio is watching this and wants to follow you as a comedian, learn more
Mhm.
about you, come see some of your shows. What's the best way that they can follow you and see where you're going to be performing and maybe catch up on some of your work?
All right. The My Instagram is at Brian Milligan Comedy. It's with an I. And then we also have our local scene is on Facebook and Instagram is the Brevard Comedy Scene. And then you can hear me on a weekly podcast called Funny Style Podcast. So thank you.
Funny style. That's the only style to have, right?
That's
Especially if you're
right.
in comedy.
That's
So
right.
I appreciate you taking the time today, Brian. Like I said, we just met and I
Yeah.
wish the connection was a little bit better so it could be a little more clear and crisp. Hopefully it doesn't look too goofy when I put this all together and it's like, oh, damn. But I sincerely appreciate you. And I'd like to maybe schedule another time somewhere down the road where we could do it again. Maybe we get a better connection and have a real in-depth convo about everything. But I sincerely appreciate you taking time out on your Friday. I wish you nothing but the very best, my friend. And I'm gonna subscribe to the podcast and I'm gonna do a little bit of research as well. And when I'm in Florida, which I get to come down there a couple times a year for roofing conferences in Orlando specifically, I am going to look up a date when you're performing and I'm going to come down and shake hands with you and say, hey, man, you remember that time you're on my podcast?
All right. That sounds
So
great.
we'll make a deal out of that. Any last words you'd like to say to the crowd here before we check out and call it a day on Keeping It Rio?
Just thanks for listening. And I appreciate you having me on your show, Chuck. Thank you.
Definitely. It's always a blast. I've enjoyed it. And like I said, we'll do this again real quick sometime down the road. Everybody, thanks for watching again. This has been an amazing episode. It's like every single one just gets a little bit better. And I appreciate the fact that I'm able to get such quality guests on. Thank you to Brian for being here and everyone for watching. Until next time, keep on keeping it real.
Bye.
That's my cheesy tagline. I love it.